Since our last recording about a week ago, we have seen another number of Santa Barbara alumni on various of the evening shows that we watch. We saw Marge Doucet on something, I think it was a Barnaby Jones, and we saw Stella Stevens on a police story, which you don't know yet, but she will be a future character named Phyllis. So that's finally another person. And unfortunately, on the 14th, Peter Mark Richmond passed away. And so I dug through the TV listings to see if any of the shows we had on the PBR were contained him. And we did jump ahead to an episode of Barnaby Jones, Dead Man's Run. So we skipped ahead to that one. And then I looked at some of the other shows I have from VHS recordings and such, and I found that he was in an episode of Switch. So we watched episode 20, Big Deal in Paradise, and he had quite a large role. And then to our shock, the FBI agent was played by Charles Bateman. And so we had two C.C. Capwells, one in the Bahamas, which is where we went on that Santa Barbara cruise, ironically, and one in Washington. And as the episode progressed, they slowly got nearer each other. The FBI guy went down to Nassau, and then he was in a car in a stakeout watching the yacht that Peter Mark Richmond's character was on.
I call you a bet. I got the 100,000.
And I thought, are we going to get a scene? Are we going to get a scene with both C.C. Capwells together?
All units, move!
Boiler alert! Yes, we got one right at the end.
Come on, Saunders. Let's move it. You're under arrest. Okay, downstairs, and don't try anything stupid.
Charles Bateman arrests Peter Mark Richmond. So that was exciting. So a lot of online tributes to Peter Mark Richmond the last couple of days. So, and I've been trying to find some Three's Company episodes with him as Reverend Snow, but the two channels that have Three's Company on syndication right now, none of them are anywhere near any of those three episodes that he appeared on as Reverend Snow. So maybe we will track them down, or maybe one of the channels will run them as a tribute.
The Lockridges aren't going to allow the daughter of land swindlers into their family.
Welcome to week 54 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
I'm Misha.
I'm Dianne.
For those joining us for the first time, we do a weekly review of Santa Barbara as if we were back in 1985 and watching the episodes as they first aired. We are currently on episode 261, which begins the week of August 5th, 1985. Now, in the current world of 2021, there have been a couple of milestones lately in other soap operas. Days of Our Lives aired its 14,000th episode a few weeks ago, and The Young and the Restless aired its 12,000th episode. Unfortunately, Santa Barbara only ever made it to episode 2137. In the episode that aired on Monday, Cece tells Eden that she's done a good job at Capwell Enterprises and with the restaurant. Cece says to her, "Women never used to go into business much when I was your age." And to which Eden replies, "We've come a long way, baby." He then warns Santana and Sophia that Gina can't have any more children and that she blames them for that. Gina leaves the hospital and hides out at Sally's apartment. Mason agrees to hide her, but tries to talk her into going back home, of course. She makes a few phone calls from there. She disguises her voice and phones Cece to tell him that Gina's left the hospital, phones Sophia, claiming to be Mason's secretary, and asks her to come to Mason's apartment, and does the same with Santana. Now, one of the voices she does, I believe, it sounded to me like she was trying to spoof the Suzanne Carlyle voice that Sophia was doing a few months ago, because she was doing this thing with her voice. So I think if that's what she was doing, that's really funny. Gina, of course, is very angry with them, and she fingers a giant pair of scissors while she's making her calls. And then later, when Santana and Sophia both arrive at around the same time, Gina is actually hiding in the hallway with the scissors in hand. So, I don't know. Do you think Gina's going to stab both Sophia and Santana and kill them in this next episode?
Well, I don't know if she'll do that, but I think it is a visual of just how... I don't know if you... I think it might be too far to say deranged, but how unsettled this has made Gina, and maybe this has destabilized her a little bit.
It may be just part of a plan that we can't quite see. Maybe she's not planning to threaten them. Maybe she's planning to do something else with that piece of paper, with that scissors. Maybe cut a piece of paper of some kind. So I guess we'll find out who survives the next episode. Of course, Mason could always arrive and stop her before she goes in. But that would be kind of a damp squib for that thing that was set up for a whole episode. Jack and Julia wake up in the wreckage of Jack's yacht, which has washed ashore somewhere. Julia has a wound on her leg, and it actually, I guess, is causing her to have a fever. I don't know how quickly you get a fever from a leg wound, but that's what's happening. She does some hallucinating, while Jack goes out to check things out on the beach that they've washed up on. As she leaves, she says, "Is this how you get rid of all of your girlfriends?"
Well, we don't entirely know how long they've been drifting and how long she's been in that condition either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, looks like there's some bits, wood all over, so she must have gotten hit by something when the yacht splintered apart.
Mm.
So Jack reports back saying he's found some fruits and fresh water, but it looks like they might be on a deserted island, which is what we had thought. So I imagine Julia and Jack will be gone for a while. Cece will have to do without a lawyer, other than Mason, for a few more weeks, possibly. Julia, in her delirium, has a flashback to her and Augusta in her teens, maybe in her very early teens, played by a young actress, and maybe late teens Augusta, played by Louise Sorel, trying hard to sound like a teen.
And they do this sort of soft lighting on it, so it's a little bit, almost, it's like they put a kind of hazy filter on it, I think, to kind of mask the fact that it is obviously a middle-aged woman playing a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And Louise Sorel has, sort of her hair done like a teenager in that. So
we remember young Sophia earlier being played by Judith McConnell, but there she wasn't quite a teenager. That was the 1969 Sophia, so it wasn't quite as bad there. So this is an interesting bit of backstory for the Wainwrights. Augusta reveals to Julia in the flashback that their family has been selling illegal land to people in Florida, and she's worried that the Lockridges aren't going to want land swindlers in the family. So this sounds like it's around the time that Augusta and Lionel are planning to get married, and the Wainwrights may not be as upper class a family as their $3 last name would make them seem.
Well, we know that Augusta's family was not necessarily the best, because we've heard references before to Lionel sort of talking about meeting her. I don't know what it was she was doing. Do you remember? Was she a masseuse or something like that?
Yeah, it wasn't a A-level job, let's say. Not the sort of thing you'd expect Ted Capel to be doing. Eden is wrapping up for the night at the Orient Express, and Cruz arrives and puts on some music while she's doing her paperwork. It's actually the instrumental of their song, I think. And she sees him, and they start to dance, which is actually similar to a daydream she'd been having. But then she stops abruptly and leaves. The next day, she starts auditioning pianists, and one of them is her high school boyfriend, Randy Jordan. And Cruz witnesses a lot of this because he keeps showing up at the Orient Express throughout the day, and they end up going out to lunch, and in the end, Eden goes to Cruz's houseboat to place the call to Randy, telling him that he's got the job. So Cruz realizes that's just to make him jealous. Santana is actually there, and she gives Cruz a kiss as she leaves, which presumably is to make Ethan jealous. Although I guess Santana wouldn't really care.
Mm-hmm.
Mason tells Lionel and Augusta that he's going to call them to testify on Ted's behalf. Augusta says she doesn't really care for Ted, but Lionel, of course, wants to help in any way. So that's 2 people we'll be seeing on the stand.
It'll be really interesting to see how Ted reacts to this line of questioning, because as we've seen throughout the preparation for Ted's trial, in many ways Ted is his own worst enemy. And I don't think he'll be very actually cooperative with Mason's line of questioning.
I think in California you don't have to appear on the stand if you don't want to, if you're the defendant. So I would assume that Steve would be able to goad Ted very easily if he got him on the stand. So I imagine Mason strongly recommending Ted not take the stand at all.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to try and make do with probably Mary and Christy and maybe even Theta's testimonies to try and paint a bad light on the Bassett family is what I'm thinking. Lionel also announces to Augusta that he's won the bet with Minx about being able to keep a job for 3 months or whatever it was.
Yes.
And she promptly made him quit because his job is disgusting. Minx did not like seeing her son on the television every Friday night or whatever it was, introducing the movies and doing ads for mattresses.
And talking about his impotency.
Yes, that was an added bonus. And Lionel also tells Augusta that Minx has appointed Brick to the board of directors of Lockridge Real Estate.
So he hasn't been given back the control over the family finances that
no, he's been given
anticipating.
Partially returned, yeah. So Augusta's, of course, very annoyed by this. She's still constantly baffled by Minx's interest in the chauffeur. So she decides she's going to break into Minx's room and look through her things. And we see her breaking into a strongbox, which has surprisingly many articles of clothing in it for a little metal box. But at the bottom, she finds something promising, a manila envelope. And in it, she finds a report from the Rousseau Detective Agency. So she realized there's actually nothing about Brick in the strongbox, but to her surprise, there's something about Sophia, because she finds what she calls a mass card made out for Sophia Wayne, March 6th, 1961, by Michael Leonard Phelps. Now, I'm not sure what a mass card is, so I looked it up, and it seems that a Catholic mass card is something you fill out for someone who's died. So I'm not quite sure who Michael Leonard Phelps is, and if he's someone who died that Sophia, had a card for, or why her name would be on it and his name, because all the examples I could find online, for example, John F. Kennedy's, it just has the name of the deceased person. So I'm really not sure what form this card takes, but presumably Augusta will do some digging, possibly with the help of the Rousseau Detective Agency, to find out what exactly this card is related to. So, yeah, it seems like we may be finding reasons for Augusta to be annoyed with Lionel again in the future, as she spends a lot of her time concerned with Sophia.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on what this could be? March 6, 61, so that's not the year she died. She died in 69. So I don't know if we know of anyone who died in 61.
No, we don't know how this relates potentially to Brick as well.
Yeah, I mean,
it could relate to Brick, maybe.
I suppose.
Or it could be a continuation of something to do with Lionel's affair with Sophia.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess maybe Minx said she knew about the affair. Maybe she hired this detective agency to follow Minx and or Lionel around, just to keep tabs on them, and this was just something they reported back, that Sophia attended this presumably Catholic event. Lionel is very annoyed when he realizes that Augusta's been snooping around in Minx's things. He had previously forbidden her from doing that, but she sneaked up there anyway, and the strongbox was put back into the desk that's in the living room. I assume that Augusta originally got it from Minx's room and just shoved it in there when she heard Lionel's car coming back. So that strongbox might be discovered to be out of place by someone in the next episode, and there could be some issues relating to that too.
Well, I'm sure Minx will also detect the fact that, even if it's put back in its original place, that things have been disheveled a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how organized all the weird clothes were, but they were, I don't know, they weren't like shirts or anything. They must have been like underwear or something. There were a number of smaller pieces. So, I don't know if that's got something to do with Sophia, and maybe something they found, some underwear they found at the Yucca Flats Motel or something that Minx has been hoarding. So, and that's about it for this episode. Summarized it fairly easily because plot-wise, those were the main things. And we'll be back in a few minutes for another episode after we watch episode 262 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Darling, I'm not up to anything.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 262 of Santa Barbara, originally aired Tuesday, August 6, 1985. My parents' anniversary. Now, since we last talked to you, we saw Ronnie Shell, who plays Frank Armstead on an episode of Adam 12, pretending to be a test pilot. So there seems to be some typecasting going on.
Mm-hmm.
We also saw Peter Mark Richmond in something, and Marge Doucet in something.
We see Peter Mark Richmond a
Mm-hmm.
lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At the Orient Express, Randy is singing. Cruz is there and annoyed.
Mm-hmm.
Mason recognizes him and tells Cruz that he's someone that Eden used to date in high school. Cruz mentions that he has had no luck interrogating the other potential suspects. They all have alibis. Cruz is at first a little annoyed with the police officer who brings him that information, saying it seems very convenient, but he ends up apologizing.
It also occurs to me that Cruz's investigation of the whole Jack Stanfield Lee thing has probably run aground too, since we haven't really seen him do any work on it, and now it's solved.
That's true.
Wasn't he supposed to be investigating Jeff's death?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's true. Jeff Barber, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess a lot of things, have suddenly gone by the wayside there. He's pretty busy with making sure Eden doesn't hire Randy, I guess. Eden is distracted during the day by having flashbacks of some good times with Cruz. And Mason is distracted because Mary's at another table playing with her hair.
And she's very dressed up. More so than I think we've seen her. We see her putting on makeup and kind of grooming herself a little bit.
And I think when Mason finally comes over to her, she says, "I knew you'd come," or something like that, or "I knew you couldn't resist."
Mm-hmm.
Julia spends the day hallucinating, and one of her hallucinations is about her telling her parents how much Jack loves her. Jack overhears this, and this seems to be a little embarrassed by his actions back then, perhaps, seeing multiple women and making Julia think he was the only one. Examining the mass card from March 6th, 1961, Augusta checks with Warren, who looks up and tells her that Cece and Sophia got married on March 15th, 1961, so 9 days later. She calls St. Anthony's to track down Father Michael Phelps, who tells her that he never wants to hear the name Lockridge again. This makes Augusta very suspicious, and she basically insists that he join her at the Orient Express. There, he is pretty easily reveals that in 1961, when he was a young priest, he heard a young girl's confession, and that Minx Lockridge barged in afterwards and basically extorted him into revealing the details. And that, of course, caused him to leave the priesthood. And so Augusta shocks him by revealing that that girl was Sophia Campwell.
Mm.
And he ends up getting her to pay him $20,000 before he'll reveal everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I suspect he will, I guess, reveal to Augusta what he had previously revealed to Minx about Sophia's confession. So I'm assuming we will find that out in the next episode.
I would think so, or the episode after that, depending on where we have our attention in the next episode.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if she's writing him a check, you'd think that would be the next scene. Plus, we got Mason just came to Mary's table, so that's got to continue. But then we thought that before, and then suddenly a day's gone by.
Well, we haven't seen Ted for a while, screwing up his own trial. So.
Mm-hmm. No, that's true. Didn't actually see Warren, did we? We just saw
just
one
heard
side
him
of the conversation.
Kind of assumed he was on the other side of the phone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mason arrives before Gina can do anything with those scissors, and Gina tells him that Santana and Sophia are in there, that she lured them there pretending to be Mason's secretary, so Mason agrees to cover for her. He phones them and tells them, "Oh, I'll be there soon, I'm running late." So they had been starting to suspect that Gina had tricked them there. So anyway, while they're chatting, Santana happens to mention to Sophia that Channing was gay and seeing Lindsay Smith.
I had actually thought all of that had come out to everybody, way back when they were reenacting the crime and so on. I don't think I really realized. I guess because it had all been revealed to the viewers, I forgot that not all the characters knew that.
Mm-hmm. Well, when Mason finds out, he says, "Well, now everyone knows except Dad." And Sophia tells him, "Do not tell Cece." He's very, I don't know if she says fragile, but she's alluding to his, illness, and I think Mason knows a little something's wrong. So, of course, Sophia at first doesn't believe Santana, but she really convinces Sophia.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Sophia's reaction was particularly enlightened. She's quite upset to find out that Channing was gay, and it's very angry at first that anyone would say that. But she does seem to accept it by the end of the conversation.
I think Santana was very convincing.
Yeah, and I think I really got the feeling from this, sort of a reinforcement of what I felt at the time, which was that Santana and Lindsay almost share a little bit of a bond now, just because they both understand what it was like to love Channing.
I would actually like to see more scenes between Santana and Lindsay. It's a shame we haven't seen Lindsay since the reenactment, I don't think. Santana at one point answers a phone call intended for Mason, and she finds out that he owes $960 to the Oasis Motel. She decides she will investigate that herself. Now, I think that's the hotel that Gina was hiding in with Brandon at one time, wasn't it?
Yes, I think so.
So that may be what that's related to.
And apparently it's a bit of a dive.
$960. Someone drank a lot of champagne there, I guess. Gina returns home and tells Cece and Eden, "Oh, I've just been at church." So while they've been worried about her, she's pretending that nothing out of the ordinary had happened. And then when Santana and Sophia arrive, she decides, I guess after thinking things through and talking to Mason, to not press, the fact that she blames them both for her miscarriage. And she says, "Oh, I think I overreacted." And then she goes upstairs, but she does shoot them a look as she's going up the stairs. So I don't think Gina's revenge is complete. I think she just needs to solidify her position with Cece and Brandon a little bit first. That's what I suspect. She wants to make sure that's rock solid. Yeah,
I don't think her desire for revenge has cooled off at all, but I think in a weird way. I mean, Gina's always been quite manipulative, but I think her association with Mason has helped her be manipulative in a little bit of a smarter way.
I guess Mason's used to try to manipulate Cece. And that is the end of a Tuesday episode. And we had cast credits again, but they were no different than before. Everyone's still in the cast. No one's been fired. And we will be back after we watch episode 263. See you then.
Bye-bye.
This may be the stupidest wild goose chase you've ever gotten yourself involved with, Augusta.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 263 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Wednesday, August 7th, 1985. Oh, it's the August sweeps. A couple days ago, we saw Lloyd Bochner on a Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea episode. And turned out he was the bad guy. What a shocker. Cece asked Sophia to come hear the new pianist at the Orient Express. Gina then gets worried about where Cece's gone to and notices Sophia's gone too. Calls the Orient Express and finds out that Cece's there. So she decides to get out of her sickbed and get all dressed up and go to the Orient Express. Sophia is telling Cece that Mason is meeting with Mary and doing everything he can to clear Ted. And Cece says that Mason is a good son. So this is, I guess, coming from his inevitable death that he is fearing. He doesn't know if he's got, just days or 30 years. But so this may signal a turning point between the relationship between Cece and Mason.
I don't know if it's a turning point that will last very long, but
he might not need Jack Stanfield Lee. Cece tells Sophia that he feels a responsibility for Gina even though he doesn't love her, which I think we've kind of started to suspect. He says he married her because of Brandon, and Sophia says it was totally worth it. So Gina arrives and at first doesn't see Sophia and is just happy that Cece's on his own, but then Sophia comes running by and she's very annoyed. Santana, who is also at the Orient Express, has called the manager of the Oasis Motel to come and see her. And he describes the woman that Mason was there with and confirms it's not Mary, who Mason is currently sitting with. And Santana just can't figure out who it is. The guy says, real skinny, not much to her. Probably his age, I guess. Big eyes, nervous, real jumpy. And it just doesn't occur to Santana that that matches anyone's description until Gina walks in and the guy says, that's her right there. And Santana's shocked. She says, that's his stepmother.
I think that could boomerang back on Mason and perhaps ruin this little detente he's got with Cece right now.
Well, I mean, doesn't Cece really suspect he was hiding her anyway? So I don't think it's going to be a huge surprise that he knew she was there at that motel that time she kidnapped Brandon. I think that was the night they're talking about, isn't it?
Well, that's what I was thinking at first. The only other thing I was thinking and why I thought it could ricochet back on Mason's relationship with Cece is if it turns out they're talking about before when they were having relations to try to have the baby.
That might explain the bill, because didn't he order champagne? Mm-hmm. Maybe. If he figures out the date. That's a good thought. We'll have to figure out exactly when it is. I'm sure Santana has that information somewhere. Mason and Mary are also at the Orient Express. He is sitting with Mary while she gets drunk. And he reveals he's had her followed and that he knows that she's left the convent and bought some clothes and visited her mother. And Mason says now she won't be able to use the church to make excuses with men. She'll have to say yes or no on her own. And they end up dancing together. And then Mason goes off to do something and Mary dances on her own. And then Mason comes back to join her just in time for Steve Bassett to walk in and punch Mason for dancing with his sister. And then Cece runs in to break it up. It says some complimentary things about Mason in the process. And Mason manages to get a punch in on Steve while everyone's distracted by Cece. So there was a generally positive attitude between Cece and Mason at the end of that.
Yeah, that was really nice to see. It did occur to me that this sort of shows the risky game that Steve is playing, because he's gone to a very popular, very upscale restaurant owned by the Capwells, and has punched out, the son of C.C. Capwell, who is also, of course, the defense for Ted. But it really does fly in the face of whatever kind of professional image that Steve is trying to cultivate in his ambitious climb up the ladder.
I think, does Mason either reveal it, that Mary's no longer a nun, or he says you've got a shot coming or something like that, because Steve makes some comment about manhandling a nun. But yet, there are still more people at the Orient Express. Of course, Augusta Lockridge is meeting with the former father, Michael Phelps, and he's in the middle of the tale of telling Augusta what he told Minx all those years ago after encountering Sophia in his confessional. And he says Sophia didn't actually come to confess, she just wanted someone to talk to. And this is what makes me think that he maybe justified it to himself in revealing to Minx what happened, because even though it was in the confessional, Sophia wasn't a Catholic and wasn't actually asking for absolution. So that's my theory as to why he succumbed to Minx's pressure so easily, but obviously it was weighed on him enough to quit the priesthood immediately after.
Now, we just, a couple of days ago, watched
I Confess,
which is an Alfred Hitchcock classic, I guess.
And that priest was a lot more...
Yeah. He was a lot more devout.
Closed mouth.
Yeah.
So, former Father Phelps reveals to Augusta that Sophia said to him that she was marrying Cece to get back at Lionel by marrying his worst enemy. And Augusta reveals to Michael that she is Lionel's wife. And then we find out something we suspected a teeny bit when we heard how Sophia was rescued by Cece. She says that she made Cece fall in love with her by staying in his guest house and being nice to Mason. Meanwhile, she was also burning any letters that showed up in the mail from Pamela, and also intercepting all the outgoing letters to Pamela that Cece's secretary had on her desk for mailing. And then when Pamela phoned, she pretended to be in bed with Cece. So we can possibly see why Minx hates Sophia so much. Because we realize Sophia is kind of scheming.
And we're also seeing a pattern, because Sophia is, at this time, staying in the guest house and being nice to Mason.
She is repeating her previously successful plan to get Cece Capwell. So she kind of reveals at the time she wasn't really in love with Cece, that she was just doing it to get back at Lionel. And she mentioned that she had never slept with Cece. But here is where her other big surprise is revealed, that she was pregnant with Lionel's child when she married Cece. And the priest suggests that she should raise the child alone. That would be the best thing. And she thinks that's a terrible idea. And then he says, well, you can just give it up then. Also, not something she wants to do. She decides to ignore his idiotic advice and just keep everything a secret. Go ahead with marrying Cece, and to bind him to the child, name him Channing Jr. So Augusta realizes that Channing was Lionel's son. Doesn't realize it, she learns it. So this is interesting, because Augusta, of course, isn't too worried about that because Channing's dead. But she doesn't know that Brandon is Channing's son and therefore Lionel's grandson. And suddenly now there is something that links Sophia with Lionel. So this actually could be more problematic for Augusta, maybe only in her head. But the fact that now Sophia and Lionel are permanently linked by Brandon, only they don't know it. And of course, I don't think very many people know that secret. So it's probably just Mason, Augusta, or Mason, Santana, Cece, Gina. I think the other kids know now. Yeah, the other kids recently found out, but I don't think they're spreading that around because they don't want Brandon to find out. So I think that'll be an unexpected side effect of what Augusta's learned today, depending on how ham-fistedly she goes about using this information. She may stumble upon the fact that Brandon is Channing's son and realize that she has got to keep Lionel from finding that out, whatever happens.
Yeah. Now, if she was perhaps a little more mercenary about it, perhaps she would see that that could be an advantage to the Lockridges to have a tie with the heir to the Capwell fortune. I mean, their own finances have been suffering quite a bit, although Bricks actually managed to turn that around a bit. So if it weren't for that emotional sort of part of it, I think that could also be something they could potentially play in their favor if they knew it.
It's interesting how quickly this came out. Augusta decided, I think yesterday, to start snooping. Found this one thing, managed to find the person who knew all the answers and got them all revealed in another episode. So this is lurching forward with this new, this new storyline of Lionel and Sophia, because it'll certainly drive a wedge between Sophia and Cece if he finds out that Channing was not his. Plus, there's the potential Lionel and Sophia link that Augusta would be horrified by. Plus, Brandon still doesn't even know that Channing was his father, and now to suddenly, Cece's going to suddenly... How is he going to feel to Brandon? And this will leave Gina without any reason for Cece to keep her around. Because if Brandon's not really his grandson, it depends how he feels. Will he feel that he doesn't care that Channing was Lionel's? Or so? Yeah,
I could see this playing out a lot of ways. If it really turned him off Brandon, then... and he's already kind of gotten tired of Gina, then Gina could potentially just take him.
But then he'd be simultaneously angry at Sophia.
Yeah.
So he'll go from having two wives to none very quickly, I think, with this one revelation.
It will be interesting to see, too, because I assume he will find out at some point, that if that drives him closer to Mason. Because
I can
Mason
only imagine
is his son.
How wonderful it would be for Mason to be the one to tell him if Mason figures it out. So I doubt Augusta would confide in Mason, though. So.
The other thing I would be interested to know is what Minx did with that information. If she just kind of kept it away, or if she actually acted on it in some way that we don't know about yet.
Well, I think... I imagine she would want to, having found that out, do everything she could to keep Lionel from probably interacting with Sophia at all. And was probably happy to have him married off to Cece, her marrying Cece, so that, that there would be a wedge between Lionel and Sophia. But, she may have been doing some behind-the-scenes things, sent Lionel out of town or something, to make sure he wasn't there when the wedding happened, to make sure he wouldn't be able to stop it or anything. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I guess perhaps Augusta could confront Minx next. That could be the next step in this, because she really can't talk to anyone else about it.
No.
Maybe Sophia. So Augusta's either going to talk to Sophia or Minx. Those are the only two people she really can talk to about this, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would actually be a very interesting episode, I think. So I look forward to that.
Yeah.
And then it'll get out somehow, so I guess someone's going to spill the beans. But Augusta... Does Augusta have any reason not to keep this a secret? I don't think so. I think she she'd want to keep this quiet too. So something's going to happen accidentally, I think.
You know, thinking of Minx again, though, I mean, when you think about it, it would have been a sort of weird situation for her because she would be living next door to her grandson.
Her grandson. Yeah, her grandson.
Yeah.
True.
Like, wouldn't she be interested in that at all? You know,
Maybe we'll find out that she was visiting Channing through the tunnels all these years, and that maybe Channing knew. Like, is it possible Channing had found this all out at some point? Maybe he did actually have some interaction with Minx, although he didn't seem to be too reticent to blackmail Lionel.
But if he knew, maybe that would be another reason why he would hate Lionel.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what did Minx do after she found out, and what will she do now when she finds out that Augusta knows. Well, got at least one exciting thing to look forward to in the coming days. So we will be back with another installment shortly after we watch episode 264 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Sometimes horrible things happen, they just do. Like what happened to Channing.
Mason, you should put some ice on that. You're going to get black eyes.
All the better to see you with, my dear.
Welcome back
Hello.
to the world's best lit podcast. We have finished episode 264 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, August 8th, 1985. And as you'll recall, everyone was hanging out at the Orient Express, and that did not change for this episode. A lot of it took place there. Steve tells Mason to stay away from Mary, and Mason says Mary came on to him. And Steve says that's very unlikely since she's a nun, and Mason decides to let Mary break the news to him. Mary tells Steve she's no longer a nun, and he's angry that he's messed up his trial. He says, "You gave the family an aura of purity." So Mary's a little annoyed that was her role for this trial, because she seems to think, obviously, the fact of Ted's guilt should be sufficient to win a trial. She says that she had only become a nun because life at home was so unbearable, and Steve mentions, that his father was terrible. She says she used to hang out in the streets and started getting into drugs, and then when she entered the convent, that got her out of that downward spiral. Steve says then that they need to be the ones to announce that she's no longer a nun to the press before Mason gets a chance to, so that they can spin it and say that she left the convent because she needs to devote all of her energies to helping Christy. Which Mary has a kind of a weird look on her face when Steve says that, like she's, I guess, doesn't want to be packaged as a product for public consumption.
Yeah, I felt like she was getting a little bit more and more disillusioned as this conversation was going on, because Steve is very much looking at it from an image and, as you say, packaging and kind of media point of view, and obviously doesn't really seem very interested in whatever struggle Mary has had to reach this decision, or really any of her actual thoughts about the situation at all.
It ended without Mary really responding to that, so we'll see in the next episode if she does, although we may not see that because the trial will be starting in the next episode. Santana tells Mason that she paid his hotel bill, and he doesn't really catch on, really, with that. She tells him to convince Gina to let her see more of Brandon, but Mason refuses and holds his ground that Gina is Brandon's mother. And she says that he'll be sorry. And before she can go into that any further, she had started talking about that terrible day when Brandon took Gina's pills and wound up on the roof, and she says, "That date is etched in my mind," and she realizes it's the same date on the receipt. And she concludes that Gina left Brandon alone to go and sleep with Mason. So she actually runs out without really letting Mason in on that. And she plans to go and tell Cece immediately.
Now, as this was playing out, I was actually trying to remember all the things that had happened during those episodes around this. Whether Santana is actually right in her conclusions, that was when Gina and Mason were banging each other, or if, I think Hank Judson was still in the picture then too, so I actually have no memory of what happened.
I think she tells the date was May something. Kelly tells Gina that she wishes she'd had a baby with Joe. And Gina talks about how great it was, to be pregnant. And then Kelly finds the ghost town that she's been drawing in the book that Nick gave her. And she phones Nick right away, and he says, oh, well, we were on the run. Went through a lot of places. Maybe we passed through there. So he's not only not giving her any hints, but actually misleading her. I don't know if that'll help her memory come back.
It did. I found the scene between Kelly and Gina kind of interesting because you get so caught up in Gina's drama and her drama with Cece and with Santana and with Sophia that you forget that actually Kelly and Ted actually kind of like Gina.
Mm-hmm. Well, when Gina was first introduced, she was introduced as Kelly's friend.
Yeah.
Which, I was shocked when I heard that, because it's kind of like she's totally in Cece's orbit and Mason's orbit, really. So. Yeah.
And it's so easy to, really of Cece's family, Eden doesn't like her, and probably honestly wouldn't like anyone Cece chose to marry who wasn't Sophia. But the other three of Cece's children actually don't mind Gina. So it's just kind of interesting to remember that sometimes.
Ted and Gina had some really nice scenes after the tunnel, during the tunnel stuff. Nick comes right over, probably to see Kelly, but also to mention to Cece that he's being hired to photograph the trial. And Cece is a little annoyed slightly, but, it's pointed out that there are about 15 photographers from everywhere going to be there. And they should probably have one who's on the family's side. Mm-hmm. So Cece sort of gives his blessing for that. So if we're in the courtroom all week, at least we'll have half the cast there for various reasons. Jade should be there, and Nick will be there. Nick and Kelly can have conversations in between adjournments or whatever, whatever they're called, recesses.
It'll be interesting to see the conversations Nick and Kelly have. And I'd also be interested if Nick, as a photographer, apparently he's a very good photographer, actually picks up anything with his photography beyond just the regular, standard court proceedings. Because remember, he has been responsible for some almost investigative photojournalism.
Mm-hmm. Kelly says to Cece when she's trying to convince him that Nick, could depict Christie's true nature. Mm-hmm. So we will see if we actually are shown any photos that Nick takes at some point. Maybe they'll be printed in Warren's newspaper. Although, does Warren like Ted? Well, considering he's dating his sister, they don't have too many scenes together. They don't really just chat about things.
Yeah, well, Warren and Ted really hated each other, initially, and Warren almost killed Ted.
Oh, that's true.
In the cave and that.
That is true. So
and the coins, that whole drama with the coins.
They've probably been keeping their distance then.
But they seem to have reconciled a bit since then.
Lionel receives a call from New Staland, and at the Orient Express, Augusta tells Sophia that, "Did you recognize that guy I was having lunch with? That was Father Michael, and he told me everything about your confession." And first, oddly enough, Sophia doesn't believe her, considering she's already got all that knowledge. So she opens up with the fact that Sophia intercepted calls and letters between Cece and Pamela, and Mason just happens to be passing by, since everyone's at the Orient Express, and Augusta immediately pulls him in and tells him everything about Sophia and Pamela and Cece. And Mason says something like, "I always knew it," or something, but he's quite busy with Mary, so he gets away from that conversation very quickly. But the information, remember we were talking yesterday about, will Augusta immediately confront Sophia or Minx? And will this information get to Mason in some way? Well, this half has immediately been, handed over to Mason. Not the information about Channing being Lionel's son, but Augusta almost immediately brings that up to Sophia to just pound it home that she knows everything.
I think we're really seeing a pattern with Augusta in this, in which she comes across, in one way or another, some very potentially damning information that she could really use. And I'm thinking of when she was blind, and then she realized that she was regaining her sight, but that Lionel was playing her with the next door neighbor. And remember how we were, during that whole storyline, saying, oh, what is Augusta going to do? How is she going to really get back at Lionel for, leading her on this whole time? And how is she going to reveal that she can actually see? And then at the end, she just kind of bottled it, I would say, as the British would say, that, the grand culmination of all of this scheming was that she, made noises in a bed with Frank and made it sound to Lionel like she was having sex with Frank, and that was kind of it. And she didn't really, I think, use it to its full potential. And I think we're seeing that again with this. She's just paid, what was it, $10,000 to this ex-priest for this information. And she doesn't build it up into some grand damaging scheme. She just blurts it all out to Sophia in the waiting area of the Orient Express, and grabs Mason as he's walking by, preoccupied with other things, and blurts it out to him, and that's it. She could have done a lot more with it, I think. She spent $10,000 on it.
There's actually been a pattern of the Lockridges sort of underutilizing things. Like there was that one time, I think it was Lionel walked into a meeting with Mason, he had the tape or something like that, and that ended up not really benefiting him. He ended up still losing the land to Mason. And then later with the Amanda Lockridge logbook, which was going to be such a big damaging thing to the Capwells, he kind of just let that go. They seem to have a pattern of underplaying their hands, I guess, or overplaying. I don't know. Just they have a good hand, but they squander it.
Yeah, going even further back, I think she could have done a lot more with that two-way mirror. I mean, she did reveal Sophia's existence to CC with it, but when you think of all the things she could have done with that two-way mirror, which none of the Capwells knew about.
Right. That's a good point. So her conclusion is... Oh, Lionel arrives just around that time to tell Augusta about Julia being missing. And they actually consider going to New Stalen. So we may see them pop over to New Stalen, which makes sense since the Capwells are going to be busy with a trial. It's not really going to touch Julia and Augusta and Lionel. So they might as well be in New Stalen for a week. And then she says to Sophia that she wants her to leave, or Cece will find out that Channing was Lionel's. So I guess leave the guest house, leave town. Just, I think I think Sophia's actually, going to have a bit of a problem, because I don't think she wants Cece to find out that information. Just because it's going to hurt him as well, not just because they'll break a bond between them. So I'm not sure what Sophia's going to do. Maybe she'll leave town for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
While the actress has her annual vacation or something, and then come back.
It could be something like that. I almost wondered if perhaps Sophia will come up with some interesting scheme that involves a costume or something again, too. That would be fun.
Seeing Cece and Sophia together at the Orient Express, Gina immediately leaves. Cece tells Sophia that it was worth jumping into that fight between Steve and Mason just to see Mason's face when he helped him. And then he says he has to start to live his last moments for his children. So this may be a turn for the Mason-Cece relationship. Cece mentions that the trial starts tomorrow, so that's where I got the idea that we'll be seeing that happening tomorrow. Tomorrow's a Friday episode, but who knows if it's going to be a new day in Santa Barbara yet. But definitely, I think by next Monday we'll be in the courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, Cece says to Sophia, "I know that whatever you and Lionel had between you is dead and buried," which Sophia kind of blanches at.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the line of the week for me, I think. Gina arrives at the Catwell house and asks why Cece lied to her. And he says that he has been getting closer to Sophia, but he promises he's not going to leave Gina. He says he really did go there to see Eden. And then that's about the time that Santana arrives to tell Cece about Gina and Mason's affair. She says she has the proof, and she holds up that receipt. And Gina says, "What are you going to tell him, that I was a prostitute or a Russian spy?" And then Santana realizes, because Cece says, "I've got this trial tomorrow, I don't have time, you better have proof." Santana, I guess, decides the receipt alone is not enough proof. And so she says, "When I come back, I'll have all the proof that you want." So I guess she's going to maybe try and get some more info from the hotel clerk on exactly, what was ordered, or get some phone records to show that Mason made, because I remember Mason made some calls from that hotel room that day, because he was busy with some other legal thing, if I recall correctly. So, and that was where they found out that Brandon was in the hospital, right? I think that's where Mason got that call and rushed out. So, maybe those phone records will be something. And, we'll see what Santana's scheme is. And, I think we've got something now that can drive a wedge between Gina and Cece. But then again, Augusta has something that can drive a wedge between Sophia and Cece.
Yeah, and as I say, I actually don't really remember the particulars around that day where Brandon took half of Gina's drugs and ended up falling asleep on the roof. I don't remember all the other events. So whether this ends up being the absolute proof Santana thinks it is, or if it, maybe comes up short in a few ways and maybe reduces her credibility, I'm not quite sure. I can't really comment on that.
I mean, Cece might simply dismiss that receipt, without anything further. Well, that was a very full Thursday episode.
It was.
And we will watch the Friday episode, and we'll see if the trial will start after a short break. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
You didn't have to jump into that fight. There were other people around that could have helped Mason.
I know, Sophia, but it was worth it just to see Mason's face when I came to help him.
I'm not frightened for myself. I'm worried about Cece's reaction. You afraid he'll kill you in cold blood? I doubt it.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 265 of Santa Barbara. Originally aired Friday, August 9th, 1985. And I forgot to mention last week that August 1st was also the day of the Daytime Emmy Awards, the 12th annual, which covered the period from March 6th, 1984 to March 5th, 1985. So a large chunk of Santa Barbara's first year would have been eligible, and it was not nominated for anything, as far as I can tell.
Aww.
And the only NBC-related award that I noticed was Outstanding Daytime Drama Series Writing went to Another World. So maybe next year, Another World, or Santa Barbara, or both, will do better. In Santa Barbara, Mary has a dream about Mason. And Christy receives a letter from Ted, right? I assume it was from Ted.
I think so.
Steve walks in, of course, just as she's found it, which it had been slipped under the door, and he tears it up. But she picks it out of the garbage later, I think. So, and then he tells Mary that she's undermining everything that he's trying to do by being seen dancing with Mason, which kind of shocks Christy. And then Mary says, "Oh, that's because I was drinking." Which shocks Christy again, and finally it comes out that Mary is no longer a nun, and Christy's quite upset by this.
Mm-hmm.
I guess she's kind of thought that was one stable thing in her life, and she says, "You messed up your life because of me. It's all my fault." So, no one is having quite the positive reaction to Mary not being a nun, except for Mason.
Yeah, and I thought that Mary in this scene was kind of, I don't know, she was kind of watching the way Steve was reacting, the way he charged in and tore up the letter. And, I think she was looking at that and kind of perhaps thinking back to her youth a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
What had driven her to be a nun in the first place, but also maybe seeing Steve with a bit more clarity.
Mm-hmm. Maybe reminded of how Steve's dad was with the family. So, Steve takes his shirt out of the dry cleaning plastic, and obviously it's the shirt that he wore on the day he raped Christy, and he starts to burn it. He actually gets a metal bucket and he lights the match, but then decides, oh, maybe I don't need to, and he just shoves it at the back of a drawer. Now, I actually remember, I think I remember seeing this whole episode, because several things from this episode rang a bell with me, so I must have had a Friday off.
Now, it would be interesting to know if this is because Steve is thrifty and he doesn't want to destroy a perfectly good shirt, or if this is a shirt he particularly likes, or perhaps, in the spirit of some criminals, he likes to have a little totem of some kind from his...
I thought maybe he would try to plant it on Ted or something.
That's another possibility as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that I didn't remember this before watching it, but once I watched it, a couple of the scenes looked familiar. Speaking of the shirt, Cruz says the fiber analysis has come back. Cruz and Mason are in the courtroom as it's been being cleaned in preparation for the trial later today. And after doing some looking around, there are 3 possible shirts that it could have come from, and he's purchased one of each. And Christy is in the courtroom waiting for trial to start, and Cruz sends in Rich with the shirt and says, "Oh, just leave it somewhere where she'll see it." And Mason and Cruz watch to see what her reaction is, and the first 2 shirts don't do anything, so Cruz has Rich go in wearing the 3rd one, and Christy is at first very taken aback when she sees it, and Cruz and Mason both witness this, and then Cruz goes in and says, "Oh, I think the man who raped you was wearing this exact shirt." And she says, "Oh, no, Ted didn't wear this shirt." And he says, "I think you're lying, and I'm on to you." And that really kind of throws her off, She goes to tell Steve that she wants to take a nap before the trial, and that she wants to have a nap in his place, which he doesn't think is weird. And then he wants to get some work done, so he goes to her place to use the phone. And as soon as he's gone, she jumps up and looks in his closet for the shirt, and doesn't find it, and for a second gives up, but then starts looking through his drawers and finds the shirt that he that day had shoved in the back. And then she picks up the phone and calls the police.
Now, I doubt very much if she will get to finish that call. Either Steve will burst in and catch her, or she'll suddenly, have a panic attack or whatever and decide not to.
This is usually the sort of thing that Steve bursts in on in past episodes.
Now, I rather suspect if he does burst in and she's sitting there holding the shirt, that then perhaps what you were suggesting might come into play, and he'll try and find a way to plant it on Ted.
Yeah, that part I don't remember. Maybe when it happens I'll remember. But on the other side of the world, Julia finally comes out of her fever, and Jack gives her a flower, and she gives him a necklace. And then they hear a helicopter, and she's kind of disappointed that he runs up to flag it down, because I think she was kind of wanting to spend some time with Jack on the desert island or whatever that it is that they've washed up on. Next thing you know, Amy is there with a medic, and Julia's being patched up, and they have a mobile phone they call Brick and Augusta to give them the good news. And Amy tells Julia and Jack that the coronation is next week, and that she has been asked to stay on by the king. Mary puts on makeup and hangs around the courthouse, hoping that Mason will notice her. That's the long and the short of what we saw. Mason, of course, does notice her reading a book and says, well, I think you're hanging around here reading a book, so that I'll notice you. Mason asks her if she's having second thoughts, about giving up her nunhood, and she says no. And then he asks what she plans to do next, and she says she's got some training in several fields, including as a nurse. She might do that. And he says, or maybe you'll meet a man and you won't have to work. 1985. Brick is working on some Lockridge investments. He's wearing a tie. I guess they had just been at a board meeting, I think.
Yeah, he looks very sharp.
Mm-hmm. Augusta is the person in the room with him. She's very annoyed that he's even on the board of directors. And he says, well, it seems like the only qualifications that most of the board had was that they were family members. And Augusta says, you'll never be a Lockridge. Now, it's weird that there are family members on this board, because we haven't really met any other Lockridges other than Warren, and Lakin.
Yeah.
And, presumably, well, Lionel has been pulled off the real estate portfolio, right? That was handed over to...
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe they discussed multiple portfolios at these board meetings, and Lionel was there, but I don't know who these other potential Lockridges are that could be on this board.
I guess one thought I had was that maybe they weren't Lockridges, but maybe they were family members of the original board.
I don't know. That's not how I interpret it. But we've never seen the board, so we don't really know what it is. It's this vague thing that. But I've known some,
I'm just thinking if you have a trusteeship, it's not necessarily family members who are on the board, but if this has been going on for a long, long time, as I say, maybe it's the son of one of the lawyers who was on it or something like that. I don't know.
I do, know one wealthy family, and I do recall them having regular meetings for financial planning that would be akin to this. So, Augusta seems to think that Brick really wants to, be a part of the family, and she's definitely not letting him think that's going to be easy. So. Sophia arrives, and Augusta asks him to send whoever it is away, and he says no. You do it yourself, and he leaves and lets Sophia in, and Augusta says, I'm going to tell, Cece, obviously, and then Sophia asks Augusta not to tell Cece that Channing was Lionel's, and Augusta promptly picks up the phone and says to Cece, oh, Cece, I need to see you about something right away. I'll be right over.
Mm-hmm.
And Sophia says, Cece's not well. It could really, damage him. And Augusta doesn't care that much. And she says, well, think about the family. And she says, Mason, Ted, Julia, Eden, Callie, they're all grown. They won't be too traumatized by this. And Sophia says, well, what about Brandon? And I guess it's the first time it's really dawned on Augusta that Brandon is Channing's son, and therefore, as Sophia quickly points out, Lionel's grandchild. And she kind of stops in her tracks. Sophia realizes that, so she pushes further and saying, Cece is going to waste no time when he finds out, coming to confront Lionel, so Lionel will find out immediately, and well then Lionel and I guess, will realize just how much we have in common with Brandon. So Sophia, as we found out in recent days, is a very wily person, and she might be able to out Augusta in this area, because I think she's really going to put a stop to Augusta's plan to tell Cece with this very interesting,
Well, I don't know why it wouldn't have occurred to Augusta right away that Brandon was also related to Lionel.
Yeah, I had been thinking maybe she doesn't know, but I guess she does. So, well, it's going to come out slowly, I guess. Mason kind of knows some things, so Mason may, once he's finished with the trial, get Augusta to, brief him a little more in depth on what she was talking about that day. And I feel even if it doesn't come out from Augusta, maybe maybe Mason would be more than happy to reveal that bit of news to his dad, although they have been kind of patching things up, so I don't know, maybe it'll drag out another 6 years before it's found out, or 21 years, however long it's been since Channing was born. 61 they said, wasn't it? 61.
Yeah.
24 years in Santa Barbara time. And that is it for the episode, but we do have some viewer mail. Someone posted on the YouTube comment section. Spencer Reed posted a couple days ago asking, are you guys finding Nick Hartley a boring character? I'm just not connecting with him in the Kelly story.
I have to admit, my heart sinks a little whenever a Nick and Kelly story comes up. Partly just because so many of the other stories are so much more interesting right now. Mm-hmm. And after they left the ghost town, it just didn't seem like there was a lot of places for that one to go. It just seems to have been treading water for quite some time now.
I have to say that I'm finding that too, which is interesting because originally I'm pretty sure that I was really invested in it because I know I was very angry with what I call the Santa Rosa incident that we will see in a few months. Almost as angry as other Santa Barbara fans feel about the roof of the Capwell Hotel incident. So, yeah, it's interesting that I'm not quite feeling Nick and Kelly the way I was 35 years ago. But maybe when Kelly gets their memory back, they will be Kelly and Joe too. We'll see. We will see. So thank you, Spencer Reed, for your comment. And hopefully that answer gives you some information. And that is all, not only for this Friday episode, but for week 54 of Santa Barbara. And week 54 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks. This episode's going to be a bit late because it's already been 3 weeks since the last one, but I did post, I re-edited our spotlight on Peter Mark Richmond, and I posted that on Tuesday instead of an episode, and I added some Facebook photos that his daughter had posted. So we've had a few views on that already. Today's Thursday, so that was 2 days ago I posted that.
And did you mention that he's one of your favorite CCs?
Well, yeah. I mean, I did notice some other people mentioned in their comments that he was the favorite CC and that he was the perfect CC. So it's interesting that to have found out that he didn't really. It's only doing it as a favor for a couple of weeks and had no plans on continuing. So.
Yeah, it's not even mentioned in most of the obituaries we've come across.
They don't even mention Santa Barbara. That's true. Yeah. So we'll be back in 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how much time we have to watch Santa Barbara, with week 56 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
That I know that whatever you and Lionel had between you is dead and buried.
In fact, I heard that most of them just happen to have family connections.
Something you'll never acquire, no matter how many corporations you work for.
Huh.
Rubbing elbows with a Lockridge doesn't mean you're suddenly going to become an honorary family member.